Day 5, tension and tears at Sean Diddy Combs' trial, morning on the courthouse steps. Dawn breaks over lower Manhattan with a slate gray sky, set in a fittingly somber tone for day 5 of Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial. Outside the courthouse, chaos brews. A crush of reporters jostle behind metal barricades, camera flashes strobing through the drizzle as Combs' legal team arrives. Clusters of onlookers gather, some curious public, some supporters of the music mogul, others women's rights advocates holding signs in solidarity with his accusers. The air crackles with tension and shouts of competing sentiments, a din of justice for Cassie intermingling with free Diddy as NYPD officers keep watch, ready to absorb another day of wrenching testimony and high-stakes drama. Inside the marble halls, the atmosphere is no less charged. Spectators lucky enough to secure a seat file into Courtroom 24B beneath flickering fluorescent lights. The federal courtroom itself feels like a stage set. The oak-paneled walls and the elevated bench of Judge Arun Subramanian framed by drawn blinds filtering weak morning light. U.S. Marshals stand at rigid attention along the walls. The jurors take their places with solemn expressions, bracing for what promises to be an emotionally exhausting day. A hush falls as the defendant is led in. Combs, clad in a slate sweater, his once confident demeanor visibly subdued after 4 days of accusations, exchanges quiet words with his lead attorney, Ana Estevao. In a far corner behind the prosecution's table, Cassie Ventura sits beside an advocate, visibly pregnant and steeling herself for what will be her final hours on the stand. Cassie Ventura's final hours on the stand, a courtroom sketch shows the gray-haired defendant glancing over his shoulder as his attorney stands facing a visibly pregnant woman on the witness stand, Judge Subramanian observing from the bench. The 5th day of trial begins where the 4th left off. Cassie Ventura, 8.5 months pregnant, resumes her testimony with a mix of resolve and fatigue etched on her face. After 3 grueling days under cross-examination, the 37-year-old R&B singer appears emotionally drained, yet determined to finish telling her story. Prosecutor Emily Johnson rises for redirect examination, her tone gentle but urgent. This is the government's last chance to reinforce their star witness's credibility. Johnson's questions come briskly, zeroing in on points the defense had muddied. Did Cassie really want any of this? Was she in it for money? Cassie firmly denies it. She testifies that she has no pending lawsuits, no financial stake hinging on Combs' conviction. The only civil lawsuit she ever brought, a bombshell and abuse suit filed in late 2023, was settled out of court, and she isn't receiving a dime to cooperate here. After filing my civil suit, I was overwhelmed and couldn't continue, she explains, voice wavering as she references why she halted a music tour amid the turmoil. I didn't want to be away from my kids at that time. The prosecutor's questions then turned to a striking offer. Would Cassie give back the $20 million settlement she received from Combs if it meant she could erase the traumatic freak-offs from her past? Cassie draws a sharp breath. Her composure finally cracks as tears spill down her cheeks. Absolutely, she sobs, voice catching. I'd have agency and autonomy. I wouldn't have had to work so hard to get it back. The courtroom is pin drop silent as she chokes out those words. It is the most emotional moment of the trial so far. Even jurors shift tearily in their seats at the sight of the witness trembling on the stand. Ventura uses a tissue to dab at her eyes, then stills herself to describe the freak-offs in frank terms. She explains that in the early phase of her relationship with Combs, she naively went along with his threesome and group sex requests, thinking it might please him. There were times he was kind and loving, she recalls, of those early days, but that kindness never lasted. Over time, the freak-offs became more degrading and coercive. Cassie testifies that Combs insisted on these drug-fueled group sex sessions frequently, even when she fell ill. Fighting back tears, she recounts how he would pressure her to participate frequently, even when I had a urinary tract infection, and would physically beat her during these encounters if she displeased him. I felt like I couldn't refuse, she admits, describing how trapped she felt by Combs' power. In the beginning, I was open to trying, Cassie says quietly. But as time went on, it changed. I tried refusing more than once, but I worried for my safety, for my career. And I was in love with him. I worried he wouldn't want me anymore if I said no. By this point, her voice is barely above a whisper. To underscore just how exploitative the arrangement felt, Cassie declares, he basically turned me into a sex worker. The phrase hangs in the air, startling in its bluntness. In the gallery, one of Combs' sons drops his gaze to the floor, while at the defense table, Combs rubs his temples and exhales slowly. On redirect, prosecutors also address a confusing timeline that the defense had highlighted regarding the alleged 2018. Cassie reaffirms that she has no doubt Combs her in August 2018. In earlier testimony, she described breaking up with him that year, and an enraged Combs allegedly forcing himself on her one night soon after. The defense seized on a muddled detail. Cassie missed a FaceTime call from her then new boyfriend, now husband, Alex Fine, during that same night. They implied this call might have occurred during the alleged, casting doubt on her story. But under redirect, Cassie clarifies the sequence. Yes, she missed Alex's call that night, but at that moment she was not being assaulted. In fact, after the violent incident, she felt so terrified and psychologically tethered to Combs that she ended up having consensual sex with him later that same night. That's when the missed call came through during consensual makeup sex that Cassie felt coerced into to smooth things over. The jurors nod as if this explanation resolves the timeline puzzle that had been nagging at them. Cassie's willingness to admit to sleeping with Combs even after accusing him only seems to bolster her credibility. It paints a picture of a victim so traumatized and controlled that she returned to her abuser out of fear and habit, not an unbelievable outlier in abuse dynamics. Before yielding the floor, Prosecutor Johnson enters into evidence a series of text messages sent in the aftermath of that 2018 incident. She projects one on the courtroom screen, a message from Combs to Cassie that reads, "I know I look bad to you. I could tell I didn't turn you on yesterday." The implication is chilling, an implicit acknowledgement that something happened yesterday that left Cassie upset or distant. Cassie testifies that this text was Combs' way of obliquely referencing the as if trying to downplay it. By now, tears slip down Cassie's face again as she describes how worthless the freak-offs and beatings made her feel. "Like dirt," she says, voice cracking. She looks directly at the man she once loved and addresses, not him, but the court. "I told him I didn't want to do them, but I feared for my safety, my career, and I loved him." In the gallery, a few audience's members sniffle or wipe their eyes. Even Judge Subramanian's usually inscrutable face softens for a split second as he regards the weeping witness. The prosecutor gently concludes, asking Cassie one final question. After everything she endured, is she planning any further legal action or looking for any payouts beyond what she's already received? "No," Cassie replies firmly, "I just want the truth to be known." With that, Cassie Ventura's redirect examination ends. She has spent 4 days testifying in this courtroom, 4 days reliving a traumatic on and off relationship that spanned over a decade. As she reaches for a water cup with a trembling hand, the prosecutors indicate they have no further questions. Defense tactics and timeline challenges. Lead defense attorney Ana Estevao is ready for one last attempt to undermine the prosecution's key witness. Estevao rises for a brief recross of Cassie, seizing the moment to press on a few points raised in redirect. The lawyer's tone is calculatedly polite but edged with skepticism. She asks, almost incredulously, whether Cassie truly didn't know that freak-offs were part and parcel of dating Combs. "You knew his sexual preference was to have these events, correct?" Estevao says, hands clasped behind her back as she paces before the witness stand. Cassie frowns, pausing before answering that she understood over time that this was something he wanted often, but "I don't know that it was a rule," she adds pointedly. The mild retort earns a brief ghost of a smile from Cassie's lawyer at the prosecution table. Sensing the witness's defiance, Estevao tries a different angle. "Ms. Ventura, by being Mr. Combs' girlfriend, you essentially agreed to participate in these freak-offs, isn't that true?" Cassie shakes her head, a flash of irritation crossing her face. Over time, I felt pressured, she admits, but that doesn't mean I truly consented, ma'am. For the first time in days, there's a steel in Cassie's voice. Esteval presses no further on that front. Instead, the defense pivots to the text messages and communications that followed the breakup and alleged. On Esteval's instruction, Cassie reluctantly reads aloud selected snippets of months-old texts on the courtroom monitor, her voice steady but betraying embarrassment. In one emotional exchange from November 2018, not long after Combs' ex-partner Kim Porter died, Cassie wrote to Combs that she was hurt. He publicly called Porter his soulmate. I didn't just leave you. I said goodbye. I wanted to be there for you. You posted that Kim was your soulmate. What was the 11 years all about? Cassie had texted him, pouring out her heartbreak. The defense highlights these messages to portray Cassie as a jilted lover, jealous and emotionally entangled with Combs even after their split. The implication is clear. A woman who writes such messages, pining for a man's affection and agonizing over his ex, does not sound like someone living in abject fear of that man. From the defense table, Esteval pointedly asked Cassie to confirm that this was her mindset in late 2018. Cassie, looking slightly cornered, admits she was hurt by Combs' actions then and that she attended Porter's memorial to support him, but she maintains that none of that negates the abuse she suffered. I was trying to make sense of things, she says softly. Esteval lets the subtext linger. Perhaps Cassie's account of and coercion is an attempt to make sense of a relationship gone sour rather than objective truth. The defense also hammers on Cassie's continued interactions with Combs after the alleged. They present text exchanges where Cassie uses affectionate language and even heart emoji with Combs in the weeks after the 2018 incident. Esteval's eyebrows arch theatrically as she asks why Cassie would continue to speak kindly to a man who supposedly violated her. Cassie sighs, explaining that leaving an abuser isn't simple. I was trying to extricate myself to keep things calm, she says, describing how she placated Combs over text out of self-preservation. When I finally ended it for good, he didn't take it well. On this point, she reminds the court that Combs' reaction to her breaking up was, in her word, explosive. Indeed, prosecutors have pointed out that Combs was caught on video violently attacking Cassie in 2016 when she tried to walk away from one of his sex parties. Esteval quickly redirects away from that dangerous territory before the jurors can ruminate on it. Shifting tactics, Esteval brings up Cassie's drug use during the relationship, subtly suggesting her memory might be clouded. Cassie earlier admitted that Combs supplied her with drugs like ecstasy to enhance freak-off sessions. Esteval asks if Cassie ever took drugs of her own volition without Combs present. Cassie concedes she once did, which she says enraged Combs, a detail that actually reinforces his controlling nature as he didn't permit her to use certain substances without him knowing. Still, the defense attorney lets the jurors absorb the image of the witness as a frequent drug user in those years, hinting that perhaps her recollection of events could be distorted. Cassie stays calm under this line of questioning, reiterating that she has been drug-free since 2022 and has undergone trauma therapy to aid her mental clarity. Finally, Esteval alludes to Cassie's civil lawsuit settlement with Combs and even an apparent settlement with the hotel. In a needling tone, she asks whether Cassie canceled a concert tour because she suddenly had a monetary windfall from settling with Combs. Cassie refutes this, stating that stress and pregnancy led her to cancel shows, not greed. When Esteval drops a suggestive question about an intercontinental settlement, implying Cassie might have quietly settled with the hotel where an incident occurred, prosecutors object vehemently. Judge Subramanian sustains the objection. The line of inquiry goes nowhere, leaving the jury to wonder what that was about. The defense ends up looking a bit desperate here, as if trying to insinuate Cassie has been chasing payouts from multiple angles without solid evidence to back it. Throughout the morning, it's evident the defense's overarching strategy is to cast Cassie as a consenting participant in an unconventional lifestyle rather than a victim trapped in a criminal enterprise. They emphasize that she stayed with Combs for years, joined his risque escapades initially willingly, and only came forward after a fallout, insinuating a motive of revenge or financial gain. Privately, Combs' lawyers have characterized this prosecution as an unjust overreach. In the courtroom, they toe that line carefully, reminding the jury that swinging and threesomes are not illegal between consenting adults. The question they try to plant in jurors' minds is, was Cassie truly coerced, or is she now rewriting consensual experiences as abuse because she's bitter? It's a classic defense narrative, one that Esteval executes with measured skepticism, but Cassie's visceral, heart-rending testimony in redirect, the raw tears and evocative description of being broken down is hard to erase. By 11:30 a.m., as Esteval wraps up her recross with a perfunctory "no further questions," it's not clear whether the defense succeeded in sowing reasonable doubt or merely appeared callous in the face of genuine trauma. With Cassie Ventura's testimony finally at an end, Judge Subramanian calls for a brief recess. As the jurors file out for lunch, Cassie rises slowly from the witness stand. The entire courtroom seems to exhale. Cassie's husband, Alex Fine, who has been a quiet pillar of support in the gallery all week, stands as she walks past, offering a steadying hand on her back. Cassie manages a faint, exhausted smile at him. She's escorted out of the courtroom by marshals and her attorney, heading for a private room where she can finally breathe free of the courtroom's gaze. Only once the doors swing closed behind her does a low murmuring break out among those remaining inside. Whispers of sympathy and debate ripple through the spectators. At the defense table, Sean Combs leans in to confer with Ana Esteval. He rubs his eyes. Even he appears worn down by Cassie's days-long saga on the stand. After a moment, Combs stands and does something unexpected. He opens his arms and embraces Esteval in a tight hug. It's a spontaneous tableau of relief and resolve captured by a sketch artist's quick strokes of pastel chalk. A courtroom artist sketch shows the grained defendant rising to hug his suited attorney in a brief embrace, a moment of respite amid the trial's tension. Esteval pats her client on the back reassuringly as they whisper. The embrace exudes a kind of "we got through it" sentiment. Cassie's direct testimony, arguably the prosecution's most potent weapon, is over. Combs' shoulders, clad in a light cashmere sweater, sag for a moment as he releases a breath. He and Esteval share a determined look. Ahead lies the task of countering everything Cassie alleged, but for now, they savor having weathered the storm of her cross-examination. Judge Subramanian remains on the bench momentarily, observing this brief human moment in silence. His expression is unreadable, though he notes the time. It's just about noon. The judge has been keenly aware of the trial's pacing, especially given the unique circumstance of Cassie's advanced pregnancy. In fact, earlier that morning, before jurors were brought in, the prosecution had filed a letter imploring the court to set a hard stop for Cassie's cross-examination by day's end. They accused the defense of deliberately dragging his feet to exhaust the pregnant witness, or worse, to push her into labor and force a mistrial. The inefficiency of cross-examination yesterday raises the inference that the defendant hopes to accomplish precisely that outcome. Prosecutors had written in frustration, noting that Esteval spent an entire day asking Cassie to read long text exchanges while barely asking questions. Subramanian, careful not to show any bias, ultimately heeded their concern to an extent. He indicated he would not allow the cross to extend past Friday. Now, with Cassie done testifying before the weekend, that crisis is averted. As he gavels the recess, the judge issues a gentle reminder to all: we will resume in 45 minutes. In the hallway during break, a swarm of journalists immediately converges on Douglas Wigdor, Cassie's attorney, seeking comment. Wigdor declines substantive remarks at this stage, only praising his client's bravery on the stand. Combs, escorted by U.S. Marshals, flashes a tight smile to his family members sitting in the gallery. His 3 adult sons are present today for support. They give him small nods of encouragement. The music mogul's mother is notably absent from court this day, but his children's steadfast presence highlights the personal stakes. Outside on the courthouse plaza, news cameras catch the trio of young men, Justin, Quincy, and Christian Combs, walking together to grab lunch during the recess. Their expressions are a mix of concern and defiance. The family had publicly decried the allegations against their patriarch as accusations, conspiracy theories, and false narratives in a joint statement months earlier. Now they steel themselves to hear more prosecution witnesses pile on claims against their father in the coming days. After lunch, the prosecution shifts gears, moving from emotional testimony to methodical evidence. They call their next witness a Special Agent Yasin Binda of the Department of Homeland Security's Human Trafficking Division. Agent Binda steps up to the stand in a crisp pantsuit, exuding confidence and professionalism. As she is sworn in, Combs watches intently, his chin lifted. He knows the factual evidence Binda provides could corroborate Cassie's narrative in devastating ways. Binda was one of the lead federal agents who arrested Combs last year and conducted a search of his living quarters. Speaking in clipped, precise tones, she describes raiding Combs' luxury suite at the Park Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan on the night of September 16, 2024, the night of his arrest. The jury's attention sharpens at the mention of the raid. This promises something tangible, perhaps even lurid to examine. Binda testifies that Combs was taken into custody in the hotel lobby without incident. Meanwhile, she and other agents swept through his multi-room penthouse suite upstairs armed with search warrants. What they found, Agent Binda says, made the purpose of that suite chillingly clear. Using a series of photographs projected onto a screen, Binda walks the jury through Combs' private lair. In one photo, mood lighting casts an airy blue glow in the corner of a dim bedroom. There were blue LED lights installed, giving off a kind of club atmosphere, Binda narrates. In another image, agents reveal a lavish marble bathroom. Incongruously, the bathtub is filled with bottles of Johnson's baby oil and Astroglide lubricant. The sheer quantity prompts a few jurors to raise their brows. Binda confirms it. Not just 1 or 2 bottles, but several bottles of baby oil in the bathroom and another 5 in the tub itself, plus at least 2 big bottles of lube stashed in a nightstand drawer. Gas rippled through the courtroom at the mention of so much sexual lubricant. Prosecutor Johnson asks what, in Binda's expert opinion, those supplies signify. In my experience with human trafficking and sex crimes, Binda explains, large quantities of baby oil and lubricant like that are used during extended group sexual encounters, exactly the kind of freak-offs described by Ms. Ventura. Combs shifts uncomfortably in his chair, tugging at his collar as jurors glance at him, recalling Cassie's testimony of nights spent doused in baby oil. Another photo, a Louis Vuitton duffel bag found in the suite, unzipped on the bed. Inside, agents discovered pill bottles and vials. Binda testifies that one prescription bottle bore an unfamiliar name, Frank Black, which investigators later learned was an alias used by Combs. In that bag were also separate containers of ketamine and MDMA, ecstasy, drugs known to lower inhibitions and heighten sexual arousal. A murmur runs through the court as Binda details this. It aligns with Cassie's account of Combs plying women with drugs to facilitate marathon sex parties. The prosecution asks Binda if such drugs are common in sex trafficking operations. She nods. Ketamine especially can incapacitate or disorient victims. It's often used by perpetrators to control their victims' compliance, she says, casting a sober look at the jury. Perhaps the most disturbing exhibit is a photo of an external hard drive recovered from Combs' suite. Binda places the actual device, sealed in an evidence bag, on the edge of the witness box for jurors to see. It's slim, black, unremarkable, but what it potentially contains causes some jurors to lean forward intently. Binda testifies that dozens of electronic devices were seized from Combs' properties, including this hard drive, and that forensic analysts are pouring through extraordinary amounts of data, nearly 90 terabytes in total from Combs' various seized electronics. The implication hangs in the air. That hard drive, or others like it, could hold video evidence of the freak-offs, possibly even the blackmail footage Cassie said Combs used to silence victims. The jurors exchange uneasy glances as they grasp that Combs may have recorded his alleged crimes. For now, Agent Binda does not divulge what, if anything, has been found on the drive. that might come later in trial, but the specter of its contents is powerful. Agent Binda's testimony continues with her show and tell of seized items. She produces a clear plastic evidence bag containing a black fanny pack. From it, she removes a stack of cash, $9,000 in $100 bills, and dramatically fans the bills out with her fingers for the jury. This was found in the suite's closet, she notes. Why is this significant? Binda explains that traffickers often keep cash handy to pay off accomplices or quickly fund an escape. The prosecution is drawing a portrait of Combs not just as an abuser, but as the kingpin of a well-resourced operation, mood lighting to set the scene, baby oil and drugs to facilitate the abuse, recordings to hold leverage, and cash at the ready, likely to buy silence or loyalty. Before Binda steps down, the prosecutor asks her to zoom out and summarize. What did these items suggest to you about Mr. Combs' activities, agent? Binda replies in measured words. They were consistent with the planning and tools of a person orchestrating regular, non-consensual commercial sex encounters. In plainer terms, she is aligning the evidence with the charges of sex trafficking and prostitution. Combs allegedly transported women for these encounters and used these supplies to carry them out. The defense counsel objects to the phrasing, and Judge Subramanian sustains, instructing jurors that any legal conclusions are for them to decide. Still, Binda's factual testimony has made its mark. Agent Binda's account is methodical and dispassionate, yet the images and items speak volumes, casting a harsh clinical light on Cassie's harrowing personal story. It's one thing to hear Cassie describe oily freak-offs. It's another to see photographic proof of a bathroom overflowing with baby oil. The jury cannot unsee those Ziploc bags stuffed with intimate supplies labeled evidence. By the time Binda is excused, prosecutors have firmly established physical corroboration of Cassie's claims. They've shown the jury a kind of crime scene of decadence and abuse. Notably, Binda also mentions that this Park Hyatt raid was not the only search. Earlier raids in March 2024 at Combs' Los Angeles and Miami homes turned up similarly startling troves. Various freak-off supplies, including narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant, she testifies, citing official reports. The sheer scale, 1,000 bottles, draws audible disbelief from spectators. Combs' defense team bristles, knowing such details could prejudice the jury, but they hold their tongues for now. The picture painted is of a man utterly steeped in this depraved behavior, spanning years and coasts. As Agent Binda steps down, one can almost sense the jurors processing the contrast. Where Cassie's testimony appealed to the heart, Binda's appeals to logic and evidence. It's a 1-2 punch from the prosecution, and yet, Day 5 still has one more surprise witness in store. One that will end the week with explosive allegations from someone who once stood by Diddy's side, Dawn Richards' shocking testimony. With roughly half an hour left in the day, the government calls a final witness to the stand, Dawn Richard. A ripple of recognition moves through the courtroom. Richard arrives not as a pop star, but as a key witness for the prosecution, here to testify against her former mentor. Wearing a long checkered blazer over a black dress, her posture poised, Richard raises her right hand to be sworn in. Observers lean forward. This testimony had been foreshadowed in court filings and has been hotly anticipated. Even Combs, who has maintained an air of bored detachment at times, fixes a steady, uneasy gaze on his one-time artist. He knows what's coming. Dawn Richards' voice carries a slight tremble as she begins by explaining her connection to Combs. In the late 2000s, she was living in his Los Angeles home as an artist on his Bad Boy Records label. She recounts one particular day in 2009 that is burned into her memory. A day she says she witnessed Sean Combs violently assaulting Cassie Ventura. I was visiting to record music, Richard testifies, setting the scene. She and Cassie were in the kitchen of Combs' home preparing breakfast. Cassie was frying eggs for him. Richard takes a breath and then delivers a narrative that causes several jurors to recoil in their seats. According to Richard, Combs came downstairs that morning in a foul, volatile mood. He was screaming, belligerent, she testifies, asking where his food was. The court reporter struggles to keep up as Richard continues. Combs started berating Cassie for not having his breakfast ready, yelling, "Where the fuck are my eggs? You never get anything right." Before Cassie could answer, Combs grabbed a hot skillet off the stove, the one full of eggs, and swung it toward Cassie's head. Gasps and a few cries of "Oh my God" escape from the gallery at this visceral image. Richard's voice shakes as she relives it. He tried to hit her over the head with it, and she fell to the ground. Cassie instinctively curled into a fetal position on the kitchen tile, covering her head with her hands, literally trying to hide her face, Richard says. In that instant, Dawn thought Cassie might be killed. Though the heavy skillet narrowly missed cracking Cassie's skull, Combs wasn't finished. Richard testifies that Combs pounced on Cassie, who was cowering on the floor. He continued to hit her in the head and he started kicking her, Richard says, voice breaking as she recalls the brutality. He was kicking her on the ground in front of us, right? Richard was not the only witness present. Other members of Combs' entourage were around and all were stunned into inaction. "I heard yelling, Cassie screaming," Richard continues softly. "I was scared for her. I was scared for myself." She admits she felt utterly powerless, unsure how to intervene or even if she should call the police. The fear was twofold: fear for Cassie's life at that moment and fear of what Combs might do to her if she interfered. "I was scared what that might mean for myself," Richard says, and her eyes dart briefly toward the defense table where Combs sits impassively. It's clear in her memory, Combs was a man capable of extreme violence and perhaps would direct it at anyone who crossed him. After what felt like an eternity, Richard testifies, Combs finally relented. He roughly dragged Cassie by the arm, hauling her off the floor and up a flight of stairs while she was still in shock and pain. Then he disappeared with Cassie behind a slammed door. Richard recounts that as the commotion subsided, she was left shaking and near tears, exchanging horrified looks with others who had seen everything. No one dared to call 911. Combs' power over his circle was that absolute. As Dawn Richards' words hang in the air, a profound silence envelops the courtroom. One juror has a hand over her mouth looking down. Another juror glances at Combs with undisguised disgust. The prosecution allows a moment of pause, letting the horror of the anecdote sink in. And then they ask Richard the logical next question. "What happened after that incident? Did Mr. Combs ever address it with you later?" Richard's answer adds a new layer, one that causes a chill to ripple through the room. She describes that the very next day, Combs gathered her and a few others in his recording studio. He acted as if nothing extraordinary had happened at first. Then he brought up the assault in a disturbingly casual manner. According to Richard, Combs told them that the violence they'd witnessed was passion and part of a normal relationship. He actually rationalized the attack on Cassie as if it were a lover's quarrel. Richard recalls him saying that Cassie was okay and it was best if everyone pretended nothing happened. He said what we saw was just what people in relationships do, Richard testifies, her tone incredulous even now, but the most ominous part came in what he said next. Combs, lowering his voice, told the group, "Where I'm from, people go missing." A collective shudder passes through the courtroom at those words. Richard understood exactly what he meant. I heard his words to mean that people end up dead. It was a threat, a warning that if anyone spoke of what they saw, there could be lethal consequences. Hearing this, a couple of jurors exchange alarmed glances. The phrase "people go missing" undercuts any remaining image of Sean Diddy Combs as a mere flashy playboy. It paints him instead as a menacing figure who invokes street justice and a permanent silence. The prosecution asked Richard how she reacted when Combs delivered that warning. "I just nodded," she says quietly. "I was afraid." One can almost feel the collective chill. In the front row, one of Combs' sons closes his eyes and swallows hard at the recounting of his father's words. Richard further testifies that this 2009 incident was not an isolated outburst. I often saw him being abusive with Cassie, she adds, describing a pattern of physical and emotional abuse she observed in the years she worked with Combs. This aligns with Cassie's own testimony that the violence was frequent and normalized behind the walls of their glamorous life. Richard's perspective as an insider turned whistleblower is invaluable to prosecutors. It corroborates Cassie's claims and shows the jury that even people in Combs' inner circle were fearful of his temper and tactics. At this juncture, defense attorney Estevao repeatedly objects, arguing that much of Richard's testimony concerns uncharged prior bad acts and could unfairly prejudice the jury. A tense sidebar conference ensues by the judge's bench, white noise machines buzzing to mask the hushed legal argument from jurors. Judge Subramanian frowns and listens to both sides. The prosecution insists the 2009 assault on Cassie is directly relevant to show Combs' pattern of control and violence. The defense counters that it's ancient history and that Richard herself has a lawsuit against Combs, suggesting her bias. Indeed, Richard acknowledges under questioning that she filed her own lawsuit against Combs in September 2024, accusing him of physically and sexually abusing her and others on that very Making the Band show that launched her. Combs, of course, denies her allegations as he does all others. The judge weighs the arguments carefully. After a few minutes, he announces that he will reserve decision on how much of Richard's testimony can be officially considered evidence. He lets the testimony proceed for now, but signals he may instruct the jury later about its limited scope. Essentially, Subramanian is thinking about whether to strike or give a cautionary instruction regarding the 2009 incident. The jury has already heard it, though. That bell cannot be unrung, and their widened eyes show that Richard's story made an impact. Given the late hour, Judge Subramanian decides to adjourn shortly after Richard's direct testimony before any cross-examination. Members of the jury will conclude for the week, he announces. He reminds jurors not to discuss the case or consume any media about it over the weekend. As the jurors exit, they cast lingering looks at Dawn Richard, who remains on the stand, and at the defendant, who now sits stony-faced, jaw clenched. Combs' reaction to Richard's testimony has been largely inscrutable. He largely avoided eye contact with her as she spoke, staring down at the defense table with an occasional shake of his head. But those observing closely noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped his pen. One might say he looked angry, one might also say he looked rattled. After the jury files out, Judge Subramanian addresses the court in a measured tone. He dismisses the jury for the day, scheduling Dawn Richards' cross-examination for Monday. Court officers begin to usher spectators out as well. The judge remains on the bench momentarily to deal with a few housekeeping matters, and it's here that another of his rulings becomes clear. Subramanian pointedly refuses a defense request to force the prosecution to disclose the exact order of upcoming witnesses beyond what's already planned. Citing prior incidents and evidence supporting a serious risk of witness tampering, the judge makes it known that he will not do anything to jeopardize witness safety. Combs, after all, was denied bail precisely because the court found he had tried to contact or intimidate witnesses from jail in the lead up to trial. In light of that, Judge Subramanian is careful about who gets what information and when. He orders the prosecution to provide him with a list of their upcoming witnesses and the anticipated order under seal by Sunday evening, and likewise orders the defense to share any new evidence with prosecutors by each evening to prevent 11th hour surprises. But he makes clear that beyond those internal disclosures, the defense cannot demand more insight into the prosecution's strategy. The court will not compel any further witness order disclosure, Subramanian says firmly, noting that given the concerns of interference, such measures are prudent and necessary. His gaze pointedly meets Combs' across the courtroom. It's a subtle admonishment. This judge is keeping tight control of the process with no patience for gamesmanship that could endanger anyone or derail the trial. Thus, as day 5 concludes, Sean Combs is let out in handcuffs once again, returning to his jail cell for the weekend. The courtroom empties of its heavy secrets, if only temporarily. But outside those walls, the impact of this day's testimony reverberates far beyond Pearl Street. Aftermath. Voices of the victim and her husband. Outside the courthouse doors, the overcast afternoon has given way to a drizzling twilight, awaiting press microphones spring forward like hungry creatures the moment Cassie Ventura emerges, flanked by her attorney Douglas Wigdor and her husband Alex Fine. Cassie's face is a mixture of relief and wariness. Wigdor gently guides the very pregnant Cassie to a podium set up for a statement. He explains that Cassie will not take questions, but has a prepared message to share. As cameras roll and balls flash, Wigdor reads Cassie's statement aloud on her behalf, his voice resolute over the rain patter. This week has been extremely challenging, but also remarkably empowering and healing for me. The statement begins conveying Cassie's feelings after 4 soul-bearing days on the stand. She thanks the court for the opportunity to finally speak her truth, something she says she was denied for so long by fear. Cassie dedicates her testimony to survivors everywhere. I hope that my testimony has given strength and a voice to other survivors, Wigdor reads on her behalf, and can help others who have suffered to speak up and also heal from abuse and fear. These words strike a chord and a small cheer goes up from a cluster of women's advocates standing to the side. There's a tremble in Wigdor's voice as he relays Cassie's gratitude. I want to thank my family and my advocates for their unwavering support, and am grateful for all the kindness and encouragement I have received, the statement says. Cassie has 2 small children and 1 on the way. She notes that with her testimony over, she is focusing on the conclusion of her pregnancy and asks for privacy for her growing family. I am glad to put this chapter of my life to rest, she affirms, adding that she will now concentrate on being a mother and moving forward. By the end, Cassie is clutching her husband's hand, her eyes glistening, but a weight visibly lifted from her shoulders. Those gathered, a mix of press and public, break into respectful applause as she finishes. Cassie herself does not speak a word at the podium. She simply nods in acknowledgement before stepping back into the fold of her supporters. Now it is Alex Fine, Cassie's husband, who steps forward to deliver his own emotional remarks. A tall, athletic man with earnest eyes, Fine has been a steady fixture in the courtroom gallery throughout Cassie's ordeal, absorbing every detail of her painful testimony. Today, he has chosen to break his silence publicly. Fine reads from a prepared statement, and though he tries to maintain composure, the emotion is evident in the tremor of his voice. Over the past 5 days, the world has gotten to witness the strength and bravery of my wife freeing herself of her past. He begins, pride and tenderness evident in every word. He addresses the curiosity many have voiced. What must it be like for him, as Cassie's partner, to hear these harrowing accounts of her abuse by another man? Fine doesn't shy away. I have felt so many things sitting there, he says. I have felt tremendous pride and overwhelming love for Cass. I have also felt profound anger that she has been subjected to sitting in front of a person who tried to break her. His voice cracks slightly on the word anger, and Cassie, standing beside him, squeezes his arm. Fine then turns his words directly to the perpetrator of that pain, not by name, but by clear implication. To him and all of those who helped him along the way, please know this. You didn't break her? The crowd gathered murmurs at that, feeling the direct rebuke aimed at Combs and anyone who enabled his actions. Fine's statement grows even more impassioned as he continues. You did not break her spirit nor her smile that lights up every room. He declares, voice strengthening. You did not break the soul of a mother who gives the best hugs and plays the silliest games with our little girls. You did not break the woman who has made me a better man. As these affirmations echo off the courthouse facade, Cassie closes her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Fine firmly rejects the narrative that he somehow rescued Cassie from her abuser when they fell in love. I did not save Cassie, as some have said, he states. To say that is an insult to the years of painful work my wife has done to save herself. Cassie saved Cassie. Several onlookers clap and whistle in approval at that powerful line. Fine elaborates that she alone broke free from the abuse, coercion, violence, and threats. She did the work of fighting the demons that only a demon himself could have done to her. His words paint Combs as that demon, but also emphasize Cassie's agency and strength. "All I have done is love her as she has loved me," Fine says, voice thick with emotion. At this, Cassie wraps her arm around her husband, leaning her head on his shoulder. In closing, Fine offers a hopeful glimpse of their life now. "Her life is now surrounded by love, laughter, and our family," he says, adding that this horrific chapter is forever put behind us. With their third child due soon, he asks for privacy as they prepare to welcome a new life into a world that, and here he pauses, perhaps choosing his words carefully, "a world that we hope will be safer for her and for all our children."